Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pokemon Legends Arceus. I should have skimmed the part because this is when we actually do the first real boss. Huzzah.
I like the way this game does boss fights.
I do too.
I think it's neat.
I love that stupid ass Japanese silent protagonist trope of just having the protagonist mouth at people and then having the character they're talking to repeat what they said instead of just having them fucking say it.
Metal Gear.
I mean, I've been playing a lot of Zelda, and that happens a lot. It's like, Link, what are you doing here? Link waves his arms like he's a Muppet for 5 seconds. Wow, really? Princess Zelda disappeared and you're looking for her? Yes, that is how people talk.
In the Breath of the Wild games, they at least have you talk through dialogue choice boxes, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I'm okay with Link not talking. I'm happy that they voice acted the games as well at all. I mean, I would have appreciated if some of the voice acting were a little bit less stilted, but they at least it's there. You know what? Actually, to bring this somewhat back on topic, one of the trailers for Scarlet and Violet had someone voice acting like the lines from the school principal, and then underneath they were like voice acting not included in the final release, and I got really upset because it's like, guys,
that did lead to something of a meme though, where in the pre-release days people would do voice acting for certain trailer material. Iono was one of the big ones where you'd have streamers doing, her cute streamer act for voice acting her trailers.
You see, when it comes to a lot of Pokemon characters, unless if they're the ones I played as a kid, I don't remember their names. But now that you said streamer, I remember who she is.
I remember Iono's name because it's a pun. Her catchphrase is, "Whose was it? I don't know."
I thought that it was Ion, like electric.
Well,
like
yeah, but it's also a pun on that too. Like it's both at once. Iono.
Yeah.
I like Iono.
They certainly did try. I mean, gym leaders have always been kind of a weird part of Pokemon's story, in that like they try to make them like memorable and relevant, but ultimately, considering that they're a very video gamey part of how Pokemon works, they kind of are just only ever going to stand somewhere. You fight them and then you leave, and
I don't know. Gen 5 had a pretty good try at it.
Well, yeah, they did try in Gen 5, but unfortunately it ultimately does sort of end up being the same sort of thing, in that each individual gym leader themselves doesn't do anything particularly special. They're just always around for whenever Team Plasma is doing their bullshit in that area. So they're connected to the overall events, even if that specific character doesn't end up having much of an impact after the fact.
Oh yeah, but it works anyway because it gives the setting a sense of place, They're
doing the best with what they got for sure. Although Gen 5 frustrates me because it has one of the best gym leader boss fight themes in the series, and then you only hear it for roughly a minute, because then when you get to the third Pokemon, which is always the hardest one, it switches to that final Pokemon theme, which I find really repetitive and boring.
That sort of pinch mode theme that all the games have now.
Yeah, I like the idea, but it's just the fact that it's just a remix of the Pokemon main theme, which I've never had much of an attachment to, is just kind of like, okay, whatever. Whereas, like every Pokemon battle theme always starts with the widdly 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 widdly, and that's iconic and whatnot. But it's so striking when you get to the gym leader fight in Gen 5, and instead of starting with the widdly widdly widdly, it goes bum 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 bum, and you're like, oh shit, and it adds like a really tense atmosphere and like a pumped up kind of nature to the fight that I really appreciated. Gen 5's soundtrack, by the way, A+. fucking phenomenal OST.
So, remind me what the fucking giant golden cleaver is.
It's like the Lord Pokemon, and it's going crazy because
God wills it.
yeah, and you have to throw bug spray at it until it gets annoyed at you, and then you fight it with your Pokemon, and then you have to dodge and do that over and over again until you beat it. I actually think that this is a neat way of having the boss fight incorporate both the RPG elements and the action elements that they're going for.
Oh boy. Just you're pretty daring.
I mean, granted, this first one's pretty easy, but especially when you get to like the frickin' final,
The Arceus fight is.
It's just like in universe, what must anyone who sees this be thinking of the dumbass who stands in front of the giant axe monster, chucking bags of balm into their face at point blank range?
Imagine like getting thrown like bags of lipstick, like chapstick at you until you like chill out. It's like, bitch, please. Oh, and you have to do something weird in order to get Scyther to evolve into him. Right?
No, you just have to use an item on him.
Oh, okay. I thought, which one do you? One of them evolves weirdly, right? Am I?
You have to. Are you talking about the Ursaring evolution?
I think that one was it.
Because that one you have to use a Pete Rock, I think, at nighttime or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly.
It's almost like there's 1,000 Pokemon, and you can't remember each individual one.
I know, right?
You know, back when I was a kid, I remember a comment from, I think it was my dad, who was like, how do you remember all this stuff about, like, Pokemon and whatnot? Because, you know, back when I was really young, I think I had a near encyclopedic knowledge of, like, Pokemon, what levels they learn, certain moves, evolutions, all that stuff. And nowadays, I'm like, there's too much. I can't do it. And I'm wondering how much of that is just there's more stuff, and how much of that is I'm old and can't be bothered anymore.
It's probably a mix of both.
So, okay. To sum up, space-time rift bad, making big Pokemon big and angry. Okay.
Yeah, basically.
And then there's also the Team Diamond and Team Pearl civil war going on, which I have feelings about, but I'll save that for when like the rivalry between them becomes more plot important, because I'll go on for an hour if I don't.
So, the thing I want to know is how many goddamn ultimate powers does this Pokemon setting have stuffed into it? Because I'm losing track.
I mean, the fact that there is a god in Pokemon period still ticks me off, considering that this is ultimate Pokemon. This is gonna sound very, very silly, so I wanna preface that Pokemon is fairly grounded, at least in Gen 1 and 2, as far as all things considered. I mean, yes, I understand that there are electric rodents and whatnot, but everything has like a very like down to earth, this is just how animals work in this universe kind of vibe to them, where there's like myths and legends about Pokemon, but there's nothing inherently supernatural. It's just, well, okay, there are literal ghosts, so yes, there are but you know what I mean. And then in Gen 3, they lean into, you know, them being more like mythical, like creatures from, like, with near godly powers with the weather Pokemon. And then in Gen 4, they're like, these are literal gods of space, time, and everything.
I'd argue that they started shifting as early as Gen 2. Well, with Ho-Oh and Lugia and and Unknown and that whole mess.
So to an extent.
Also, there
yes.
was Celebi, although you wouldn't
Yes.
necessarily know what that was about.
Yeah, so to an extent, that is true. Although those were more just old. They always just felt old to me, as opposed to like otherworldly or like godly in terms of power.
This
Like,
this is somewhat lost in the West because we aren't as connected to that culture. But Gen 2 was really leaning into that rural Japanese sort of Shinto setting.
okay, that is fair, and like I am remembering now, like there's also like the monk types in Gen 2 also like have that classical Japanese monk attire going on. So that might be more, you are right in that.
And
that
Shinto
sense.
Shinto is one of those religions where everything has a frickin' god, and the gods have 3 more gods behind them. It's a really complicated sort of animism.
Yeah, and
but-
we don't, and a lot of that does go over my head because I know next to nothing about it. But
Yeah, and Gen 2 came out like a little too early for a lot of us to have been swept up in the anime familiarity that sort of defined the more 2000s-y era. So
yeah, because I mean, Pokemon was many people's introduction to anime, and it was around the time Pokemon was big that Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, were breaking into pop culture.
they were still pushing like Americanized names and stuff into things.
Yeah, you had Joey Wheeler and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! Is always the really weird one to me because you've got Yami Yugi and Seto Kaiba, which are very Japanese names. And then you've got Joey Wheeler and like Faye Valentine on the other hand, and it's like,
How about that case closed and it's Mount Rushmore Festival of Lights, where it's like this Japanese as hell festival with Japanese letters burning on the mountains and everyone in yukatas going around to food stalls and stuff.
Eat your hamburgers, Apollo.
But it's the Mount Rushmore Festival of Lights. Jesus fucking Christ, no wonder that dub didn't last.
man. So Ace Attorney, it's like, I'm surprised. It's like Ace Attorney, aside from the fact that like Maya, like there's the spirit medium stuff, which is very Japanese, but they kind of like write it as, oh, they're some weird hick town that lives in the mountains. Like me as a 13-year-old could buy that. And then you get to game 4 where they make a character for the ramen stand that Maya always went to, but since in the English version they always got burgers instead, it makes no sense. And I'm like, what now? Excuse me?
Eat your hamburgers, Apollo.
It's like,
Must be some really unique burger patties.
yeah, so it's like, oh man. But
Okay. So why is this kid delivering plot important details to us?
She's delivering a major side quest.
oh, this is the unknown girl, right?
No, this is the
Oh,
Spiritomb.
The Spiritomb girl. Yeah.
Yeah.
Main character is awfully generous taking this little kid so seriously.
It took me a surprisingly long time to figure out that this was Spiritomb. Supposed to be the Spiritomb.
I'm sorry, just the utterly gormless smile that the protagonist
Also,
has.
the fact that she has her arms out like, yes, I am child.
I mean, like, just the expression the main character is wearing throughout this whole conversation is just like, smile and nod, smile and nod.
Yeah, so that was a big thing in Gen 7 where, like, all the characters, like, have these, like, shocked expression during cutscenes, and then your main character's, like, completely blank-faced the entire time. And you could tell that when they were working on this, they had heard that criticism. So instead what they do is they have the main character make these extremely overly animated puppet, like, oh, kind of animations, which look worse than just having the character just be blank-faced.
No, she's a self-insert isekai protagonist, so she knows the plot going in and has to pretend to be surprised. But sometimes she just forgets.
Oh, man. freaking I don't know. Oh, this is
Hi, Mars.
With her Diamond and Pearl version's the one with the freaking Perugly that's a pain in the ass, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I hate this bitch.
She's got those really pointy, angular eyes. She's colored red. And whenever she's surprised, her pupils go all small, which gives her like a sort of impolite look to her face. She must be a rival of some kind.
She does look surprisingly like the Gen 2 rival, actually. Only gender bent.
Well, that's the name of this game, isn't it? Jesus. This
is another thing. Where did you get the shiny Swinub from?
I think that was also from Pokemon Go, and I'm just using it to build up Pokedex stuff. I'm not going to actually use it.
This is another thing that I appreciate is that they add, because you're catching a lot of redundant Pokemon in this game, they give you things for them to do, like, oh, you can have them help build the town and whatnot. And I just find that a really charming way to, not just feel like you're catching Pokemon and keeping them locked up for no reason,
Yeah, it's also like there is a certain amount of romanticism when it comes to farming in these old-timey settings. So it's a good way to bring that out too, without necessarily requiring quite so much active participation from the player.
I'm surprised it's been romanticized as much as it is, because farming fucking sucks. Like literally backbreaking labor.
Well, I mean, back in the day, you would at least, farm and directly make your money that way, or make your living that way. Eat your food that you were growing, or at least the worst examples of it, so you could sell the better stuff. Nowadays, there's like so many middleman steps to the process of making your living that it feels far too mechanical, and stuff like farming has been largely industrialized. So we don't really have that fantasy of buying a parcel of land and farming to make your living without all of those strings attached anymore. Even the process of becoming a farmer nowadays has to be wrapped up in all that business stuff and industrial crap. Although you're not the only one who is aware of how rose tinted that old view is, because sometimes games and stories will sort of lampshade it.
Yeah, I mean, if you go a long enough time without doing anything, people will look back in the past and think that, oh yeah, things were better back then. I saw a tweet the other day where just like, oh, back in the 1990s where people didn't eat processed food. It's like, I can tell you were born in 2010 because
we absolutely did.
Why do you think everybody? Why there's such such an overweight crisis in the mid 2000s, huh?
Okay, people seriously misunderstand what old-timey diets were like. They were not more nutritious. Okay? They were largely just whatever you could get your hands on. And any sort of like nutritional value that you got from mixing up your food intake was pure happenstance.
That's actually one of my favorite lines from Captain America 2 is like Falcon is like, oh man, you must really miss it in the old days, and Cap is like, oh, it's actually not as bad as you think. Food's way better now. We used to boil everything. And it's just like, he's got a point.
There was the cooking methods. Depending on how far back you went, there was also the lack of widespread information about good cooking, and there were also the preservation methods. And let's not forget the fact that like the only reason bread lasts as long as it does now is because of all the scientific advances that we've made as far as
GMOs, Lewis, and genetically, yeah.
We've been making genetically modified food since we started farming. That's what
Do you
farming
think
is.
corn is supposed to look like that?
Or bananas.
Did you know that corn like literally has no like natural way to spread its seeds the way it is right now? It is completely dependent on humans in order to survive as an organism, because we have genetically modified it since like the 1600. No, I think it's even earlier, because I think the earliest use of
when people think
like,
when people think of GMOs, they tend to think of like
chemicals and stuff.
Of chemicals and lab and lab-based genetic testing and all of this weird high-tech stuff, but really it's everything from that to just selective breeding.
Yeah, it's not like a scientist is taking every carrot that you buy at the store and like stabbing a syringe of yellow liquid into it, which I think people kind of think
Resident Evil carrots.
Yeah.
but like bread in particular, people talk about how unhealthy our bread is now, but like a lot of the stuff that they decry as unhealthy, which isn't necessarily unhealthy, it's just not as healthy as the old stuff might have been. That stuff is stuff that we do so that we have bread that lasts more than a day after baking. So, you know, swings and roundabouts, I guess.
Yeah, nobody actually owns a bread box anymore.
It used to be you'd have to go to like the fucking bakery, right? And just get your bread every day and eat it that day, because if you waited even a day, it would start to get really rock hard. But like, you know.
Oh, I forgot, you take off your shoes every time you walk into a house in this game. And as a filthy American who doesn't always take my shoes off when you go in the house, it's just really weird and amusing.
Also, we're giving this guy the alpha parasect, so it's going to take up like half his place.
It's like, for some reason, it just looks like Parasec's back could be a really comfortable beanbag chair.
It does. It kind of does, yeah. Oh. Jesus.
It is also really amusing seeing people being like, oh, that's a Pokemon. And like imagining what the world would be like if we just suddenly let a giraffe into our house. You know, because that's kind of what it's like for this.
It is interesting to see this point in Pokemon history, yeah.
I love doing dynamic entries into people's offices.
Dude, if I could action roll into every like room that I go into without breaking a bone or hearing my body crack every time, I'd do it.
If only we were digital constructs and not flesh and blood beings.
Listen, if I don't live long enough to upload my brain into the internet, I don't know what even the point is anymore.
I want to live to see the Ghost in the Shell era too. It looks like a complete hellscape, but you know, it's a different sort of hellscape than we live in currently, and that makes it automatically better.
Area 2 is the swamp area, right?
Yes.
I actually liked this area, which surprised me, because normally the swamp level sucks. In every game that has ever existed, the swamp level's bad. And in this one, it's good, which shocked me.